I was a caver in the early 70s, and caving back in the Whetstone Mountains. Just like every caver, me and my partners found caves of our own and decided to keep their secrets. When this life-changing event happened, we had stumbled upon a hollow cave and came to the immediate conclusion that some things can and should be kept secret. With us, we loved to explore sinkholes and short caves. They had much bigger caves, and most people don't realize that the Sonoran Desert hides dozens of miles of known caves. A lot of them are just unreachable by humans. In reality, I think it's more like thousands of miles of caves, to be honest. Is it so hard to believe that there's thousands of miles of caverns making up a subterranean world beneath the most biologically diverse desert in the entire world? The first thing we did was have a sonar guy come out, and he radared the flat pan. He scoped deep, and when he did, he started rambling on and cheering. He was all flushed and excited, claiming that there were veins and veins of tunnels underneath us. I remember one time after this, I was talking with a friend named Eric Campbell. He's a state biologist. This was back when bell-bottoms were a thing, so mind you, this was a long time ago. We had a whole conversation about evolution, and I brought up the fact that if a rat can live his whole life without taking a single drink of water, what else don't we know about? He argued back to me that those kangaroo rats that I'm talking about evolved so that it gets moisture from leaves and things like that. Then he went on to describe their nasal passages and how it cools its breath through condensation and it can convert moisture into water. He said that's evolution, and I told him that was exactly my point. Evolution. He knew that we found something in those caves, although to this day I have never told him. He asked me what we found down there, but of course I didn't answer him. Over the years, he asked me a few more times if it was more than just fossils we found, but I never gave him a solid answer until now. The fossils he was referring to were from one of our digs. We had found prehistoric fossils that I showed him. They contained some trilobites and maybe a toad or turtle and a snake. But we saved the best for ourselves, never showing anybody what we found. This is what we found. It was deep in this labyrinth of caves, never before seen by humans, or at least so we think. We found a fossil of something I initially thought was a pterodactyl. We separated the buildup and we discovered the wings to be attached to a biped with this massive torso and long, thick legs. This was no pterodactyl. This was something undiscovered. The first thing I realized was nobody would lay such an elaborate hoax miles down in an unknown cave beneath a desert to maybe be found by some cavers sometime in the next 1,000 years. The truth be told, we didn't want anyone else to know about it because I still believe that this wasn't some animal that we found. It was some kind of beast. This thing was just too unbelievable. The best thing I could ascertain, judging from the stream layering, was that this thing was probably from the Mesozoic era, somewhere between the Jurassic and Cretaceous period. This life form appeared to be far too advanced by my way of thinking to be organically lodged there. But then, I didn't know what it was, so anybody's guess, really. I knew if we reported this, it would either be ridiculed or falsely debunked. There was a chance now, though, that we could even be killed for what we knew. I know it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but I saw that thing. It shook the conventions of everything science knows. And you have to be aware where that road can take you. I remember the three of us, standing there for more than an hour after jimmying the limestone away, our flashlights just bouncing up around the pot. It appeared to be a perfectly preserved skeletal fossil of a flying, horned man, approximately 8 feet tall. The more we inspected this thing, the more adrenaline my body had to accommodate. This wasn't a natural species. I was scared. It had horns like a ram, and a 10-foot plus wingspan. It had horribly vicious teeth with claws on both hands and feet, both of which had 5 fingers and toes. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a torso. I never saw anything even close to resembling this kind of dinosaur in any grade school book. We agreed to keep our secret, and I knew I could trust them. They're honest guys, but more importantly, they're desert quasi-hermits like me. We live in modest desert homes and came here for a reason: to be away from the assholes of the world. It was 3 days before we talked to each other again, and when we did speak, I could see these guys had the same thing on their minds that I did. Did we really see that? What the hell was that thing? That weekend, we made a plan to go back down there, and once we got there, through all the twists and turns and squeezing and pushing, we ended up at the same place, facing that same impossible thing, that pristine fossil, miles along unknown caves in the Sonoran underground. It was just like we left it. This revelation. We took pictures and agreed to stay silent for the time. It was another 3 days later that I decided I'd go back down and venture into the cave on a Saturday night. It was driving me crazy. I needed to go back down there. I needed answers. But at the last minute, I felt it would be wrong to go without my partners. I called them and they were just as bothered as me. And we all met at the entry spot outside of Tombstone. We went in around 10 p.m. on a Saturday night. We got around halfway there when we heard someone else in the cave. Now, I want you to understand this. It would be bad enough to hear anyone else in the desert on a Saturday night. But when you're this deep in an unknown cave, well, then you know there's trouble. We tried to play it as cool as possible, but that's not the easiest thing to do that deep down. We heard something walking a ways down in the cave beneath us. It sounded like it was on 2 feet. And trust me, something walking on 2 feet sounds completely different than something walking on 4 feet. And whatever it was sounded heavy. Then I hear something coming from behind us, down one of the tributary tunnels. We whisper to each other about what to do and how to do it. But then the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I heard this long, purring sound directly behind us. It was from the only exit or entrance that we knew about. I almost didn't want to look, but I had to. I turned my flashlight. There was nothing there. We all knew something had just been there, though. Whatever it was moving quickly. We decided it was time to get the hell out of there, though, and that we'd come back in the morning. We got about a quarter of the way when we heard the loud purring sound, followed by these clicking noises. This time it was coming from behind us where the fossil was. We turned our flashlights around, and the lights fell on this thing. It looked, at first, like this huge Gila monster. The eyes and skin appeared reptilian, and then it lifted its head up, and I noticed 2 things. It had sheep horns and a prominent cleft chin. A cleft chin? Are you kidding me? This thing looked like the damn devil incarnate, and we were down in a cave in a desert, no less. I suddenly felt like we'd been tricked into descending into hell. I mean, it felt like hell. It was hot and dark and scary, and we were trapped in here with this big creature, this monster. Then some reflex took over in me, and something in the other half of my brain tried to convince me that I was just looking at an animal, an organic thing that would die and decompose. A desert creature, even with this gothic face staring back at me. My logical brain told me not to get bit, or at least attacked. My way of thinking was Gila monsters are venomous, and I didn't want to risk envenomation from something so big. But then that thing stood up from the spot in the hole that it was in. All my rationalization was gone. It stood up in the dark, and you could see the wings folded behind it. And then it began sizing us up. It was standing there in the dark, this massive, human-like body, but nothing a human could ever be. It really did look like the devil incarnate. It even had gleaming yellow eyes. It took my breath away. Really, I could not breathe. Then this thing leaned forward and poked its head towards us, and it squinted at us. It dropped its mouth open, and you could hear it breathing. I could even feel the hot, dead breath boiling over us. And then, in a flash, faster than anything I've ever seen move, it disappeared in the hole below. Let me tell you, we got the hell out of there as fast as we could. When we got about 20 feet up, things behind us started to collapse. The rocks tumbled in, and the dust billowed up the shaft behind us. That only made us move faster. I did not want to be trapped in a cave-in. By the time we got out, we were amazed that we didn't get killed in the avalanche. It's terrifying to be in a cave during a crush, but it's unthinkable to be in there during a crush when something unthinkable is chasing you around. We stood there around the cars, trying to catch our breath, trying to keep our hearts from beating right out of our chest, trying to compose ourselves. I noticed the dust cloud pouring out of the cave. It looked like a smoking slick. It was like there was an explosion from the opening. It was a full-on collapse, and we were lucky that we got out of there alive. There was a great deal of talking between the three of us. We went home. I couldn't sleep. The next day, the three of us did go back. We'd only go down about 40 feet because the shaft was hopelessly slabbed off. It was crushed solid. I suppose we could have requested an excavation or some other nonsense like that, but something like that would never happen. As the days passed, we all agreed that the animal we saw down in the cave was exactly the same creature that we saw as the fossil. It was just living further down in those caves. Really, it's not that impossible to believe when you think about it, considering sharks and crocodiles haven't really evolved since the days of the dinosaur. The only difference is they're not as shocking because they live in plain sight. We're used to them by now. As far as I know, nobody else has ever made a discovery like that. Nobody's been back in that cave because nobody's ever had it excavated. And in fact, I don't even know if there's anybody else besides the three of us that know that cave even exists. And one of us has since passed. So that's only 2 people in the entire world that I know where that cave is. As far as all the pictures go that we took of that thing, well, that camera got stolen right out of the car the very next morning. That helps me believe that it's a conspiracy, and it reminds me of why I didn't want to make this discovery known from the get-go. I don't know if we'll ever figure out what that thing was, but reading all of these stories and listening to all of these encounters on YouTube makes me believe that it was not in fact some kind of natural animal that we saw, and I'm leaning more towards a paranormal encounter. I would love to hear if anybody else has witnessed something like this, or have any theories on what it could have been.